This is the series of books that have come out of my conference series. As I said, I've done 14 of them. 9 of them, I guess, happily are out of print now. The last 3 or 4, I have just a few copies left of the last 3 before Musa Dagh. And you can see that each one of them takes a different province. And they look at the province from different points of view: historical, demographic, literature, music, and different approaches to the area. And then sadly, they almost all end with deportation, the story of the deportations, or in the case of Izmir, Smyrna, the burning of the city of Smyrna in 1922, and the flight of the population there. And then also life in diaspora. For example, on Kessab, I have a chapter by Susan Patty, who writes about the Kessabsis in diaspora. We're talking about, you can see the map of historic Armenia to the far. We're talking just about the inlet there of the Mediterranean Sea. And here you can see it again. I'm sorry. Can we shut this light here, right here? Armin, shut this light, please. Overhead, over me. A little more. Get it dark. That's good. Here you see an interesting boundary. And I have a whole chapter by Keith Wattenbaugh on how this boundary was drawn. You can see that the boundary between Syria and Turkey come way down, and the area that you see there is known as the Sanjak, or the county of Alexandretta, of Iskenderun, and it was a part of Syria until 1938-39, a part of the French Mandate. The French took over Syria after World War I, and this became the part of the French Mandate. But in 1938, the French, in order to curry favor with Mustafa Kemal, who had always claimed this area, like the Turks today are claiming Mosul. So they were claiming this area for many years, and because World War II was approaching, and they wanted to wean the Turks away from the Germans, the Turks were very pro-German, they then arranged a rigged election. We've heard a lot about rigged elections lately, but it was a rigged election in which the French allowed, in a plebiscite, to guarantee the Turkish delegates one more than half of those delegates who were going to decide on the future of the region. They guaranteed that. And that 1 over half voted to separate this area from Syria, and they declare it as a separate republic of Hatay, and then to annex it to Turkey in 1939. And that's when all the Musa Daghs left, because the people from Musa Dagh, after they had resisted, then went to Port Said during World War I, and came back and started putting their lives back together, only to be driven out again 20 years later. Here is the Gulf of Alexandretta. Can you see all right there? You sure you don't want to move? Okay. And the Armenian Church of Karasun Manuk, still active in Iskenderun and Alexandretta. The interior of the church, the exterior of the church. And here we see Antioch, which is the main city of the Sanjak of Alexandretta. Antioch, ancient Christian city. A number of our Christian churches still have bishops and patriarchs here. And Armenians were important here in the times of the Crusaders and the Giligian Takavaruchu, the kingdom of Cilicia, and again the Orontos River that flows from Syria into Antioch, and these are the homes of the Christian merchants, the Armenian merchants of Antioch once upon a time. Beylan is another town in the Sanjak, Beylan is also one of those areas from which many of the Armenians fled in 1938-39. They went to Beirut and to Aleppo and to many other areas. Hello.
Hello.
All the way from Glendale.
All the way from another meeting. Sorry.
Oh my goodness. All right. And this is Kırık Khan, also part of the Sanjak. And I've been told that if you've heard of Archbishop Shah, help me. Jerusalem, Shahanir. Yelishen Yusuf. Shaheh Zuruntavarner. This is the Church of St Gregory the Illuminator in Kırık Khan. It still belongs to the Armenian Patriarchate, but they're not able to touch it. And the interior of the church, abandoned in 1939. Abandoned in 1939. Now we're at Dort Yol. Dort Yol is on the sea. It's famous for citrus fruit. The Armenians exported tons and tons of oranges, lemon, grapefruit, and other things. And you can see, even to this day, that the citrus fruit is there. Here the Armenians, as I say, were very proud because they learned to defend themselves in the early massacres of 1895, 96, and once again in 1909. There were massacres in both years, and the Armenian revolutionaries of Dort Yol were able to organize a defense so that their village didn't suffer at that time. They were not successful in 1915, and they were deported, but came back after the war and did defend themselves until 1921, when they were once again abandoned by the French, who in 1921 abandoned all of Cilicia, Marash and Adana, Antioch, Hajan, and Dort Yol, and abandoned it to the Turkish government. And at that time, the Dort Yolsis withdrew to Jordan and other areas. Here you can see where Dort Yol is up. Where's my pointer? Hold on.
Did you bring it?
Maybe I got it. So here is Dort Yol here, and all these villages around there were also Armenian orchard little towns, and they were caught in the massacres, but those who survived came to Dort Yol where they defended themselves. You see, it is the southern tip of Cilicia, the southern tip of Cilicia here, and down below is where we will find Musa Dagh and Kessab. This is Jirai Boyajan, who became the teacher, headmaster of the school there, and also organized the youth into learning to defend themselves. Zabadi Asayan is a well-known feminist writer who, after the Cilician massacres, wrote In the Runes, Avirag Nerumech, and she was a part of the feminist movement in Istanbul that organized and sent teachers to the provinces to teach the children Armenian in towns and cities that had become Turkish-speaking, including Dort Yol, Adana, Antioch. They wanted to send teachers out, and they did. And here you find her in her bonnet, and deciding that they were going to support the school in Dort Yol because it had defended itself. They were very much impressed by the defense, and so they chose Dort Yol as one of their things. Here is the Armenian school. They have two schools, the upper city and lower city, the one down by the sea and one up above. This is the home of the author of the chapter, one of the chapters on Dort Yol, Musa Dagh, who lived in Los Angeles. You may know him. He was the editor of the Noror newspaper for a bit and teacher at the AGBU school. And here you find the teachers and students of the Armenian schools of Dort Yol and the defenders of the city. In 1895 and 1909, and once again in 1919, 1920. Now this is the AGBU clinic. The AGBU invested a lot of money in Dort Yol, particularly in an orphanage there. And this is the Armenian Relief Society, Agad Mirkhach. These were auxiliary units to the fighters at that time. Because of the importance of Dort Yol, Dikran Kelekian, a wealthy merchant, through the AGBU, the Parikor Zagan, established the Kelekian orphanage in Dort Yol in 1911, 1912, with many of the orphans from the massacres of Giliga in 1909 coming to that orphanage. And here you see, after World War I, they had gathered the orphans not only from Dort Yol, but from the desert. And you see some of the children that were gathered into the Kelekian orphanage. They had their band and scouting very soon. And here you see them, doesn't show very well, but French officials who occupied the area after 1918 are visiting the Kelekian orphanage. And finally, Saha Catholicos, who was the Catholicos of Cilicia, the last Catholicos who lived in Sis, is visiting this orphanage. Here you have a picture of Boğaz Nubar Pasha, who was the head of the AGBU, the founder, and here of General Antranik. This was the church of St Gregory in the upper city. This is what it looks like now, just a wall. And the interior, you see the wildflowers and the very large structure. It looks like it's being demolished. One of the chapters, and these maps, I have to thank Ruben Berberian is here. Ruben has kindly drawn these very important maps for us because this is how we get to understand what's what. And one of the authors in this volume is Hagop Chopurian. Hagop Chopurian is a Kessabsi and has written a 3-volume history of Kessab in Armenian. But he also has written about the Rouge Valley, a separate book. Here's Aleppo, Halep, in the news today. And here is Ainjad over here, and Alexandretta here. Between Aleppo and Kessab, there were probably 50 Armenian villages. Most of them are now lost. But he goes over all of them, and many of them still have Armenian names. Look at Armenazan here. Many of them survived only by converting to Catholicism. They retained their Christianity, but they became Arab-speaking Catholics, Latin Catholics. Here is the village of Kanei, where the Latin Catholic Church is. But you see here they are on Surpas Vazazin, the Ascension of Mary, where as the Armenians around the world celebrate with festivities, here too you'll find the Arab-speaking Armenians doing their traditional dances. As you hear in the courtyard of the church, their shurshbar. These are the countryside and the dress. Now here are 2 villages, Yakubia and Kanei. One has become Catholic and one has remained Armenian up until at least the 1960s. And here you see it with the cupola of the church. the Church of the Apostolic Church of Surpana that was rebuilt in 1914, as you see it here, and Norokvetsab, Surpana Yegeotsos, and then the Tvagan, and under the Catholicos, and under the Jakubia. And again, we can't see, they're too small. They had an Armenian school in Jakubia, at least until the 1950s, established in 1929, Verazanut, the Renaissance School. And here is the school and the students as of the 1950s. And finally, Latakia, where many Armenians, as you know, fled, a Shiite center, Alawi center, and where there is a small Armenian community and church. This is the Church of Surpasvazadzin. And in 2014, when the Kesabs had to flee for 3 months, many of them took refuge in and around this church. This is now Musa Dagh from the sea. And here are the villages with the main villages. And the mount, when we talk about the defense of Musa Dagh, they went up to the high mountain here from all these villages. Not all of the Musa Daghs went up to the mountain. Some of them actually, if you've read the 40 Days of Musa Dagh by Franz Werfel, you know that some of them actually went on the deportation. Many of them died and didn't return, but most of them, from most of the villages, left everything and went up to the mountain and organized a defense that lasted for more than 40 days, even though Franz Werfel calls it the 40 days to give it a biblical meaning. It was 44, 45 days they resisted
53
before they were 50?
53 days.
52, thank you. Yeah. Here's Bitias. Look how beautiful the village of Bitias in Musa Dagh is. Greenery everywhere and resort homes. This was what a typical Armenian home looked like in the 19th and early 20th century in Bitias. This was the Armenian Evangelical Church of Bitias. And now that same church has been converted into the mosque for the village of Bitias. This was Surp Stepanos Church. I said that the Musa Daghs went to Port Said for 2-3 years, and then they returned in 1919. And the priest in Bitias wanted very much to build a new church. And for 20 years, he tried to scrape together money. And a step at a time, he put together this very large church. And they were just getting ready to put the cupola, the dome on it in 1938, when the plebiscite took place and they gave Musa Dagh to Turkey. And so the church remained incomplete. And here you can see inside the church, a very well-structured church without the dome. Surp Stepanos, never used. And here are the villages that you can recognize. This is Yovonoluk, which is the main, perhaps the main village. It's where Levon Der-Bedrosian's parents were born before they, was 1938-39. And here we are in Yovonoluk, look at where we're looking. We're looking across the sea to Kessab. This is right, you see how close they are. Musa Dagh is here, and Kessab is here, right across the bay. And that's Mount Kasios. The spring of Yovonoluk. And the mosque, interestingly, normally they convert Armenian churches to mosques. In this case, they left the church underneath and built the mosque on top of the church. Here you see the Armenian church of Yovonoluk underneath the mosque. The mosque is above. And the Armenian inscription still. And it says Tateos, 1901, a building. And this is Khaderbeg, the famous plane tree, the Sose tree of Khaderbeg, from which the villagers there are all very proud and remember it. It's their, sort of their symbol. And this was the church of Khaderbeg. Khabusiye Surpsakis church, now converted to a mosque. This was the most far out village, closer to the sea and to the historic ancient Seleucid capital of Seleucia, a port city of Seleucia. Way back, they were doing Madagh and after church in Vakaf, the village of Vakaf. And one of the important occupations was making combs, sander. Sanderga b'shinein, b'badrastein, yev haleb yev urish tever g'danein, yev g'tzafein. And the villagers, Armenian political parties made an early presence in Musa Dagh. This is the ARF, the Dashnakhuchun, in the year 1910 already. And the Hanjagan party, some 15 years later, the Paramaz Hanjagan group. Many of these people ultimately repatriated to Soviet Armenia. And so it changed both the political and the demographic complexion of these communities. Here are the self-armed defense groups of various villages. Each village had its own defense group. One is Khaderbeg, one is Haji Habibli, and so forth. This was Dikran Andreasyan, one of the important leaders of the self-defense of Musa Dagh, along with Moses Der Kalustian and others, and he's written an account of the defense. During which these 50 days or so, the defenders lost 18 of their men to the attackers. These were the French ships after well over almost 2 months of defense. The Armenians were out of weaponry, out of ammunition, out of food. The Turkish army continued to harass and attack. So they were in a very precarious position, and as you know the story well, they sent swimmers down to the sea with big banners of Christians in distress, and they were discovered by the French vessels, French warships, which ultimately rescued them. They came down, this is the path they came down from the mountain. They came down the back side of the mountain. They went up one side and came down to the sea on the back side. And here you see the French vessels, and also here the French soldiers are taking the Musa Dagh's aboard ship. And here they are in Port Said already, starting in 1915, 16, 17, 18, and every year they had a procession with the banner, the Red Cross banner, that they demonstrated or showed at the time of their rescue. They had a tent city, built a tent city. It was supported from Cairo by the headquarters of the AGBU, and this tent city was in the Sinai Desert in Port Said. And they started the school right away. This is the Sisvan school, and the Sisvan students from Musa Dagh. And here you see the students and teachers, mainly teachers. Many of the Musa Daghs and Kessabs joined the French Légion d'Orient, the French Legion that joined General Allenby's Allied forces in the Near East and played an important role, particularly in the Battle of Ararat, which is a mountain in Palestine, where they were able to go, they had to go uphill against the machine guns, the German machine guns and artillery, and overrun their positions. And a number of those who died are today found in the cemetery of the Armenian Patriarchate in Jerusalem. When the Musa Daghs went back to Musa Dagh, here you find them in Bitias. Look at the Armenians in French uniforms. This is the time of the French mandate over Syria, so here they are in French uniforms as the headmen of their villages. And their armed groups. And you can see they started also minor industry here. This is the Vostine textile industry. And you can see the machinery they imported into Bitias, I believe it was, to start their textile works. And every year they went up to the mountain for a memorial service. And you see the memorial service in memory especially of the 18 fallen men. These are their graves. When they had to leave Musa Dagh in 1939, they took their remains with them and not to leave them behind. This was the memorial that was established there. Now it is in semi-ruins. Franz Werfel, did the 40 days of Musa Dagh, and here's his picture. You know the story about him. The first English publication. And this is Thalberg, a very important director in Hollywood. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer bought the rights to the film, which Thalberg, who had done Ben-Hur and Mutiny on the Boundary, was going to produce this, but one of my authors, Aras Omunyan, who is a PhD student at UCLA, did a fine chapter on the unmaking of this film by the pressure that was put on to Hollywood and all the internal shenanigans that went on between the filmmaker, the State Department, and the Turkish embassy, ultimately ending up in the shelving of the project. Here is Louis Mayer with his women in Washington. And here is Erdogan, the ambassador to, the first Turkish ambassador to the United States after World War I. He put a lot of pressure on it, and he was supported by Cordell Hull, who was the Secretary of State, who put pressure on Hollywood. And there's a long story, and if you read that, you will find to what lengths both the Turkish government will go, and to what lengths the United States government will help them and cooperate with them to achieve their goals. Once again, here is the Sanjak, as you see it in 1938, part of the Syrian mandate, but a separate area with Turkish claims to it. And when the plebiscite was rigged, the Musa Daghs, almost all of them, decided that they would leave. And that was very difficult for them because after 20 years of having returned to their homes, they have to leave one more time. Excuse me. So that did my light show. He's an engineer, he can fix it. But that's true. Why don't you take it there and play with it, that's fine. You're the scientist, so. Here's the Gashade. This is the road of Exodus from Musa Dagh down to the port of Basit, which is next door. And from Basit, they took ships down to Beirut. And here you see them going down. and waiting for the ships, and the ships taking the Musa Daghs to a port, at Junay or somewhere, I'm not sure which port, maybe Beirut. And then they had to go to the Bekaa Valley, where the French allocated for them a piece of land, which was, I think, Hovannisian, Bara, Bambachigar, full of malaria, swamps, terrible. I mean, these are people who are mountain people, and they're bringing the mountain people and putting them into the flat plains with diseases and all kinds of things. And yet they were able. Here's Reverend Vahan, who was probably baptized every Musa Dagh apostolic for some 30 years or more there. Here were the homes, the typical homes of the Musa Daghs after they moved to the Bekaa Valley of Antioch. And as it happened, people from each of the 6 villages, they picked a particular street. So even when they went to Antioch, they lived according to the villages from which they had come. Here you find Father Vahan and Dernarik Shirikyan, whose Sernataruchun, what do we call Sernataruchun? Ordination. At whose ordination I was present, actually, when I went to Beirut more than a half century ago to learn Armenian. He was a young priest who had just been ordained, and I had the pleasure of staying. In his home at a time in the 50s where there was no electricity. They used kerosene lamps. Everyone had kerosene lamps, and that's, and electricity came much later. And then the city developed into, or the village developed into a beautiful place thanks to Armenian ingenuity and hard labor. Yarav? Oh, something fell. Oh, it's broken?
It's broken.
That's no good. All right, so here we see Antioch. Did that fall again? Yeah. No, forget it. And look at the priest with his garden. This is Dernarik with his cabbages, apples, corn. They had done this all in one generation. And you see Antioch now from the main road going to Damascus, from Beirut to Damascus. And you can see the Apostolic Cathedral, the new cathedral, in the center of the village. The Harach school that was supported by the newspaper Harach in Paris, Shavash Misakyan. The Apostolic Cathedral or Church, the Evangelical Church, the Catholic Holy Rosary Church, which has now been rebuilt into this beautiful structure. And one of the authors, actually, Digin Sona Zetlian, she lives here in Los Angeles, did a lot of interviews with old Musa Daghs about their folklore. And this is one of the women whom she interviewed. In 1946, Musa Daghs are celebrating because they're preparing to get on board ship to go to Soviet Armenia in what is known as the repatriation, which unfortunately had a very negative effect on the local communities because they became so much weaker because of the departure. And here they are leaving on the ship to Batum, not knowing what awaits them. Here they are in Armenia, pictures of them in Armenia. They're getting together, even at a time when they were frowned upon to gather for the Musa Daghs. And something is working here. Oh, all right. And here you see that they're making herisa. And now, under post-Soviet period, it is it's okay. They made a little village known as Musalev outside of Echmiadzin, and this is the monument to them. Now you can see how much herisa they're making to distribute on their day. and now officially being blessed with government officials around. And now we're back once again. I wanted to take us back to Musa Dagh because there is one village, as you know, that's still there, and this is Vakaf. There's the mountain of Musa Dagh, and here we are in Vakaf where they have orange groves and other kinds of products. Here they're making artificially growing citrus fruits under these tents. This is the church of Surpas Vazazin, where every year they have a big celebration. Armenians from Istanbul and many other areas come to celebrate here. And you saw the young lady in the first part, I don't know if you understood her, saying that she was an Arab Christian but married to an Armenian and had 3 boys whose names were Armenian. And this is inside the church. It's a small town or village, less than probably 100 or so souls, and mainly elderly because the young people have left. This is the home we saw, Baron Demircan, who died this last year at the age of 100, Ronnie? Is that right, Ani? Age of 100. And these are the new homes of Vakaf. Now we're in Kessab. We've left Musa Dagh, and Musa Dagh decided to resist, and they were lucky. They succeeded by partly because of their geography. As we know, other people who tried to resist in whether it was Hajan or Shabin Karahisar and many other places did not. They fought, but they died in the end because there was no rescue, no route to rescue, whereas the Musa Daghs had a route to rescue. This is Kessab. And again, I learned a lot in these conferences that I do. You know, before I knew much about it, I thought that Kessab was just this one place. But it's spread out. You know, here's Karaduran way over here, Bashort, Eskuren, Chakoljuk, Chalaljuk, Ekizoluk, Kirkine, Duzagach, Balagach, all of these make up greater Kessab. And in all, they probably were never more than 8,000 people or so, but each one in their own village and into agriculture and to the art crafts. In 1938, this area also was going to be annexed to Turkey. And there was, they even had sent down Turkish textbooks for the kids to start learning Turkish. But there was an international outcry, and it ended up that they redrew the boundary so that a part of Kessab was left on the Turkish side, including Mount Cassius and their pilgrimage site and their pasture lands. But the main population centers were left in Syria. And that's why you have this boundary that goes, Turkey is like almost on 3 sides. So you can understand that in 2014, when the al-Nusra, al-Qaeda affiliate entered into Kessab, it wasn't hard. They just had to go, you know, right across the frontier here, and they were there within a half hour's time. So in any case, this area remained and remains today a part of Syria, and therefore one of the few Armenian areas in this region that still is Armenian, even though much of the population is left, and there are, the face of the village is almost unrecognizable, the main village, because there's so much building, high-rise building. Many Arabs have come in to purchase it. It's a wonderful, salubrious climate. People want to come here for summer, so it's not only Armenians, but Arabs and others. And in normal times, if it ever gets back to normal, we might expect that to continue. Here is the coastline at Karaduras. And this is Kessab in the mid-20th century, 1950s, about the time that I would have been in the Middle East. You can see it's a 1-story, 2-story on hillside, built on a hillside. And here's Mount Cassius in the background, and the high rises now growing up in the front of the city. This is Palum, was a pilgrimage site where the Armenians of Kessab would go every year for a pilgrimage, no longer accessible to them. It's an ancient medieval ruins. Now this is something Kessabsis love, and it's unique perhaps to them. They're making purpur, which is it makes a foam from boiling grapes and mixing it with a certain soil that makes a very thick molasses. And they eat it with the leaf of a particular tree. You have to eat it on the leaf, and it's thick enough. And I experienced it for the first time this year with the Kessabsis here in Thousand Oaks. It was a lot of fun. And here you see that they're making the rub and the purpur, and people with their grapes and baskets. And here they are, the men here. You see there? He's holding a leaf, and they're eating it on top of a leaf. And what the remain is what I learned this term in Beirut, but you probably know it, bekmez. You know what bekmez is? It becomes bekmez, so it's like molasses. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They eat it with grape leaves.
And here is the port of Basit. As I said, people have to make choices. And in 1909, when the Kessabsis were attacked, they were very hostile neighboring villages, Turkish villages, and they had to flee. So they fled down to Basit, where they lined up. This is 1909, to get on board ship to go to Latakia, and their savior was an Italian priest, Father Sabatino, who had a lot of connections in Latakia and with the allied consuls, and was able to bring the shipping to Basit to take aboard the Kessabsis. And here they are returning after an exile of a month or so. And the Kessabsis called this 1909 Medz Talana. Medz Talana. It was a looting plunder. It was a plunder that took place because all of their homes were looted when they returned. Here they are again with the Aghas of Kessab, with a very well-known American missionary woman, or tough woman, whose name was Effie Chambers. And she was a tough woman that helped them rebuild. And here we find, again, Catholicos Sahar, who comes in 1909 after his people have returned safely to Kessab. This is Father Sabatino with his Latin Catholic students, Armenian, who was critical in the rescue of the Kessab Armenians in 1909. This was his church and school of Surp Mikhail. And here is Dr. Hovannisian, who was a leader of the Kessab community, and about whom, as I say, in oral histories, there are both good and not so good memories. So some want to blame him, and others justify the fact that it would have been impossible to try to resist in view of the fact that the Turks had already occupied a part of Kessab in 1915. And so the Kessabsis went on exile. They were deported in 1915. And here is, again, thanks to Rubin's maps, you can see, here's where Kessab is. And so they went to Juzar al-Shubur, and then most of them went south to Hama, Homs, Damascus, Amman, into Jordan. Now, the Protestants felt, the Protestants were much wealthier than the Apostolics, and they were able to bribe the Kaimakam, the governor, and the local officials. So they allowed the Protestants, most of them, to live here to either rent houses and to live here for several months while the Apostolics were driven south, and of course the attrition rate was horrible in these deportation camps from disease and hunger and epidemics that went on, and just outright violence. But unfortunately for the Protestants, a second order came that they too had to be deported. But they were not going to be deported like the others this way. Their deportation route would take them to Raqqa and to Del Zor. So the Armenian evangelicals, at first thinking that they had escaped the worst of it, ended up having the worst of it, because they ended up in Del Zor, and as you know, here the attrition rate was the worst of anywhere. After they came back in 1919, 1920, there was անիշխանություն գար Սուրյո մեջ. Ֆրանսիացիները Դագավին մանդատի իշխանությունը չէին հաստատած, անիշխանություն գային, շուրջը թուրքական գյուղեր գային, հակառակորդներ էին, եւ քեսաբցիները 2 տարի ինքնավար հանրապետություն ստեղծեցին. They created their own little administration, and the head of the armed forces was this person, Savdejan, Ofseya Savdejan, who organized and helped to defend the village against all the attackers until the French were able to come down and establish order. And you see the Armenian fighters, these are after they returned, 1919, 1920, defending Kessab. So again, when we come to choices, at this time the choice was to defend. And the defense groups. And here we see Kessab today with the mountain. This was the old library. This was the Sahagan school in the 1920s. These are another of the Armenian schools. In the 1920s, the Armenians of Kessab united, Protestant and Apostolic, to create the Kessab Educational Association, Kessabi Usumnasirats Miutuna, and they established their first school. This was in 1927, and their first graduating class here in 1927, 28. You see all the students here. And they would go on outings. One was a school outing, one was Dashnakshun outing, the ARF outing. And here is a new library and cultural center of Kessab, the modern city. You can see the Apostolic Church in the center, Surpasvazazin. This is the Kessab Educational Association's new school, brand new school in Kessab. And here is their first graduating class. And their Apostolic Cathedral. And the Catholic Surp Mikhail. Actually, the Catholics were badly divided. The Armenian Catholics were not so much, but they were badly divided. Megmasa Latin Tsesin Gehedevein, Megmasna Haigagan, Hai Catholic Tsesin, Cardinal Ajanani Michotsar, Gam Chankero, Այդ երկու զատ բաժինները միացան եւ բոլորը դարձան հայ կաթոլիկ եկեղեցու մաս է եւ հայ կաթոլիկները որոնք ավելի աղքատ էին գրծան այս եկեղեցին Սուրբ Նայեկայելը իրեն դարձնել իրենց. So it was the Cardinal Agajanian was important in uniting the two Catholic branches under the Armenian Catholics. This is their church of Surp Mikhail. Their school of Parahuso, School of Good Hope. And here is Cardinal Agajanian, the patriarch, Armenian Catholic patriarch, who in these day and age probably would have elected Pope. In those days, when there was a possibility only Italians were elected, but he was a great intellect, actually from the Caucasus, from Akhaltsakh in Akhalkalak Akhaltsakh in the Caucasus. And here he is with the Hominid Men Boy Scouts in Kessab, and the Armenian Holy Trinity Evangelical Church, and its students, and Hominid Men Scouts, And we're going to look at some of the villages. This is Karaduran or Kaladuran, also Surpasvazazin. This was the school in the 1920s. This is the Armenian Evangelical Church of Karaduran. And the Nahadagat's Protestant school there. And here we have the Hunchagian group prior to repatriation, and with the Paramas and guides youth in Karaduran. Kesab is overwhelmingly, well, either neutral or pro-ARF, Dashnat Sagan, especially after the repatriation, when many of the pro-Hunchagian or pro-Soviet elements went to Soviet Armenia. This is Eskurin, and you can see the countryside. I'm just going to go quickly over it. Kürkene, the Armenian Evangelical Church of Kürkene, no apostolic church, entirely Protestant village. And here their school. Also Ekizoluk, Digin Memerian, right? Is she still Memerian?
Memorial, yeah.
She is Memerian. She was Tutigyan, right? Yeah. She tells me it's 100% Protestant and 100% Dashnat Sagan. Both. You know, so the Protestants were very nationalistic are nationalistic in Kesab. Again, the church of Ekizoluk. And this is the Kesab Educational Association's choir of the village. And these are outlying villages, Veri Bavjavats and Lari Bavjavats. This is an abandoned Armenian Latin monastery because the Armenians of this village have virtually disappeared. Finally, we move to the Kesab diaspora. And of course, the Kesabs are very proud of their native son, Karikin, who was the Catholicos of Cilicia, a very good friend of mine, who really we were born the same year, and we were buddies in Beirut for a year when I was learning Armenian, and he later became the Catholicos. Shall I tell a funny story, Garo? He came to stay with us one night. And my son Garo, in the middle of the night, of course we gave our bedroom to the Catholicos. So Garo, in the middle of the night, wakes up, as he always does, and runs to Mama and Papa's bed. And he crawls in the bed, and he does this in his sleep. And he feels this big beard, and he's terrified and jumps out of bed, crying, what's going on? So that was good. That was Catholicos and Garo. Okay, now. Here he is, very friendly. You can see him with students, a wonderful person. And here we are now, the Kesabs around the world. They've gone back to Kesab on the anniversary of the KEA, and you find them, there's a Reverend Sarmazian from Canada, and Tutigyan from Detroit, and Jajikian, and many others from Los Angeles and other areas are going back on a pilgrimage. They don't forget Kesab. And here, right here, not far away, in the Kesab Educational Hall, Sarai Mej, it is Mekat Kisats Baragabaran, Megan Avali Chenkide, Kesab Zinara. Ano, Garmir Fistan. Have you heard another one from them? All right. And here they are. And here they are now in Thousand Oaks making purpur. Again, nostalgia, reminiscence, trying to link up with a past that is not there, but which still speaks to their hearts. Here they have their Chao Hochnuchun, their blessing of the grapes in August, and Camp Kesab in the 1980s. They had a camp up by the AYF camp in the mountains. Now they don't have it, but they still have Camp Kesab. And here you have it in 2010, the campers. So they continue trying to make increasingly difficult because these young people, many of them have no connection any longer, just like we who were born in America or other countries have heard stories of the old towns, but because we have no personal connection, it becomes weaker and weaker. Finally, 2014, one of the authors in this last book that I wrote, or published, is Charles Glass. Charles Glass is a correspondent and travels throughout Syria, and was one of the first to go to Kessab after it had been liberated by the Syrian army in 2014. And this is one of the pictures he took. The house entirely empty, having been looted, the doors there, and in Arabic, Allah Akbar, God is great, and elsewhere other inscriptions saying, if you want to live, you must become Muslim, and another one saying, we shall return. So it's rather ominous that as the al-Nusra is leaving, it's leaving these messages for the returning Armenians. And finally, the Kessabs here in their Kessab picnic in 2014 prepared t-shirts, I love Kessab, and finally their determination that Kessab shall remain Armenian. And we certainly hope that that will be and remain the case. So I've taken you very rapidly through 3 communities. Each of them has a little different history. Each of them had little different choices and opportunities. Some of them capitalized them, others of them didn't have much choice, but they are, I consider these communities heroic communities. They were truly heroic in that they, surrounded by hostility everywhere, most of them decided they would make a stand, whether it was at one time or another, to make a stand and to bring honor to themselves and to their people. So thank you very much.